winds howling through the sails tonight, lost in darkness, not a star in sight. Stole a loaf, now I'm bound for days, gonna land upon Botany Bay. Rowdy shouts and chains they clink, prisoners cry and old timbers creak. Guards' eyes cold, they got no sway. We'll all end up in Botany Bay. What freedom have we lost, I say, chained by fate to Botany Bay. For bread I stole, this debt I pay. A hopeless sail to Botany Bay. Yesterday a cold and hungry man, tomorrow I'll toil in a foreign land. Grit your teeth, mate, come what may. We're headed now to Botany Bay. Of home begin to fade. Sunrise shows the life we've made. Tides don't care if we scream or pray. We're destined now for Botany Bay. Chained by fate to Botany Bay. For bread I stole, this debt I pay. A hopeless sail to Botany Bay.
Welcome to the Convict Diaries. The history of human habitation in Australia began not with the arrival of the First Fleet, but with the migration of the ancestors of Aboriginal Australians, who journeyed by sea from maritime Southeast Asia between 50,000 and 65,000 years ago. They established communities across the Australian continent and surrounding islands. Around 2,500 years ago, the ancestors of today's Torres Strait Islanders arrived from present-day Papua New Guinea, settling the islands at the northern tip of Australia. During the 17th century, Dutch navigators explored the western and southern coasts, naming the land New Holland. From around 1720, and possibly earlier, Macassan Tripangers travelled to Australia's northern shores for trade. In 1770, Lieutenant James Cook mapped the east coast of Australia and claimed it for Great Britain. Upon his return to London, he reported favourably on Botany Bay, now part of Sydney, as a potential site for colonisation. This led to the arrival of the First Fleet in January 1788, establishing a British penal colony. The concept of terra nullius zero, or the idea that the land belonged to no one, was central to Britain's ability to claim Australia.
The First Fleet, which arrived in Australia in 1788, carried many convicts who would go on to play crucial roles in the development of the early colony. One such individual was Matthew Everingham, an English convict who, despite his criminal conviction, became a respected and successful member of the fledgling New South Wales settlement. His story exemplifies the struggles, resilience, and transformation of those who were transported to Australia as part of Britain's penal system.
Matthew Everingham was born in London, England, on the 25th of July, 1768, the son of Joseph Everingham and his wife, Mary. He lived at Elm Court in the Temple, London, and worked as a clerk in the office of Mr. Claremont, a London attorney. In 1784, at approximately 15 years old, he falsely obtained 2 law books, Burns' Justice and Compton's Practice, valued at 10 shillings, from another attorney, Samuel Shepherd. He had forged a letter of authority from Shepherd to sell them to a book vendor. Convicted of fraud at Middlesex Jail Delivery, the Old Bailey, he was sentenced to 7 years of transportation to the penal colony of New South Wales on July 7, 1784. Samuel Shepherd was reportedly shocked by the severity of the sentence. Everingham was received on the censor hulk on the 6th of September, 1784, at the age of 15, and remained there until he was transferred to Portsmouth on the 24th of February, 1787. From there, he was embarked onto the Scarborough on the 27th of February, 1787, as part of the First Fleet.
Everingham was among the approximately 750 convicts transported aboard the First Fleet, which left his homeland of England in 1787 under the command of Captain Arthur Phillip. The demanding voyage took several months, and the convicts endured harsh conditions, including overcrowding, limited rations, and the ever-present risk of disease. Despite these many and varied challenges, Everingham survived the journey and arrived in Botany Bay in January 1788, before the fleet relocated to Port Jackson, where the settlement of Sydney was established.
Once in Australia, Everingham quickly distinguished himself as a hard-working and resourceful individual. His literacy and clerical skills proved to be valuable assets in the struggling colony, which lacked educated settlers. He was soon assigned to clerical duties, likely assisting government officials in administrative tasks. Copies of 3 letters written by Everingham to his prosecutor, Samuel Shepherd, have survived. These letters indicate that Shepherd continued to provide financial and emotional support from the time of Everingham's conviction until at least 1792. Everingham expressed his gratitude for this assistance, particularly since he claimed that all of his friends and relatives had turned their backs upon him.
On February 7, 1789, Everingham was punished with 25 lashes for drunkenness and falsehood. Later that year, on August 15, he became an important witness in the trial of Sarah Bellamy. At the time, he was working with Charles Parker, a carpenter from Sirius. Sarah was charged with disturbing the peace, but with strong witnesses, including Matthew Everingham and John Harris, the case was dismissed. The incident occurred when Captain Meredith of the Marines and Mr. Kilty, master of the Sirius, left the governor's house late at night, inebriated, and created a commotion outside Sarah's house. Alarmed, she screamed murder. In response, Captain Meredith attempted to have Sarah arrested, but John Harris, the night watchman, intervened and restrained him.
As time passed, Everingham gained his freedom and became a landowner. He was granted land near the Hawkesbury River, a region vital for agricultural development. He became a farmer, contributing to the colony's food supply and stability. Like many emancipated convicts, he played a critical role in ensuring the survival and expansion of the settlement.
In June 1790, the Second Fleet arrived, carrying more convicts, including Elizabeth Rhymes. Elizabeth, who at 15 or 16 had been sentenced to 7 years of transportation for stealing a sheet and a blanket valued at 7 shillings. Everingham married Elizabeth Rhymes on March 13, 1791, at St. John's Church of England, Rose Hill, Parramatta, New South Wales. The ceremony was conducted by Reverend Richard Johnson, with Thomas Barnsley and Peter Stewart serving as witnesses. Matthew signed the register, while Elizabeth marked with a cross.
At the time of his marriage in March 1791, Everingham wrote to Shepherd that he was overseer of all the pit sawyers and measured the work in addition to supervising women employed in needlework. He was stationed at Rose Hill, where he served as an assistant to Henry Dodd, the farm superintendent. 4 months after his marriage, on the 18th of July, 1791, Everingham and his wife settled on a 50-acre land grant at the Ponds, which was officially recorded on the 22nd of February, 1792. On the 6th of December, 1791, Lieutenant General Watkin Tench, a British military officer renowned for his writings about his experiences with the First Fleet, visited the couple. Tench expressed skepticism about Everingham's transition from his former profession, remarking that the attorney's clerk "I thought out of his province." Initially, Everingham was optimistic about his new life, writing that he had youth on my side and was pretty well inured to hard work as well as the benefit of an agreeable partner. However, his later accounts painted a starkly different picture, detailing significant challenges such as illness, the tragic loss of his daughter, and repeated failures of his crops.
But do you know what? By October 1792, his farm was beginning to show progress, with 5 acres of India corn, 1 acre of English wheat, and other crops. He owned livestock, including pregnant sows and poultry, and hoped to sustain his family independently within 3 months. By 1795, Matthew had secured the position of government baker in Parramatta.
Also in 1795, Matthew Everingham set out to attempt to cross the Blue Mountains. This is a fascinating but lesser-known episode in early Australian exploration. Along with 2 others from the First Fleet, William Reid and John Ramsay, who was a seaman, Matthew embarked on this daring expedition nearly 2 decades before the famous successful crossing by Lawson, Black's Land, and Wentworth in 1813. The trio ventured into uncharted territory, trekking and climbing for 6 days before being forced to turn back due to dangerously low provisions. The expedition lasted a total of 13 days, with the final 3 days spent entirely without food. Adding to the hardship, Matthew completed the journey without shoes, which he later described as even more challenging than the lack of food. This primary attempt highlights the determination and resilience of the men and women who arrived in those very early days, and who were willing to push the boundaries of the known world despite limited resources and knowledge of the terrain. Matthew's participation in this expedition also underscores his adventurous spirit and willingness to take risks, traits that were evident throughout his life in the colony. Unfortunately, detailed records of the journey are scarce, and much of what is known comes from later accounts and interpretations. The attempt remains a testament to the courage and perseverance of early explorers who laid the groundwork for future expeditions into Australia's rugged interior. That same year, Governor Philip Gidley King relocated Matthew to more fertile farming land at Portland on the Hawkesbury River, an area that had become increasingly vital to the colony's agricultural production. However, tragedy struck in May 1804 when Matthew Everingham, his wife Elizabeth, and their Irish servant were attacked by Indigenous people at their farm in Portland. According to reports in the Sydney Gazette, the family was speared, and their home and barn were burned to the ground. This violent encounter was part of a broader pattern of conflict between settlers and Indigenous groups as colonial expansion encroached upon traditional lands, leading to escalating tensions and violent confrontations. The attack on the Everingham family serves as a stark reminder of the complex and often brutal interactions between settlers and Indigenous peoples in early colonial Australia. For Matthew and Elizabeth, the attack was a personal tragedy, but in a broader sense, it reflected the struggles of a rapidly growing colony grappling with the challenges of land acquisition, survival, and the consequences of displacement. By the early 1800s, the Hawkesbury River region had emerged as a crucial agricultural hub for the New South Wales colony. However, it was also the ancestral land of the Darug people, who had lived in the area for thousands of years.
The arrival of European settlers led to the disruption of indigenous food sources, sacred sites, and ways of life. As settlements expanded, traditional hunting grounds were cleared for crops and livestock, causing significant strain on indigenous communities. In response, some groups engaged in acts of resistance, including attacks on farms and settlers, as they sought to defend their land and resources.
While the Sydney Gazette reported the incident from the settlers' perspective, it is essential to consider the Indigenous viewpoint. For the Darug people, the rapid encroachment of colonial settlements represented an existential threat. The attack on the Everingham family, while tragic, must be understood within the broader context of indigenous resistance against the loss of their homelands and the destruction of their way of life. The settlers, often supported by colonial authorities, retaliated with punitive expeditions, escalating the cycle of violence between the two groups. The conflict along the Hawkesbury River was emblematic of the broader struggles occurring throughout the colony. The colonial government, recognizing the importance of agricultural expansion, encouraged settlement while also attempting to manage relations with indigenous peoples. However, policies of land grants and military-backed responses to indigenous resistance often exacerbated hostilities. Today, incidents like the attack on the Everingham family highlight the need for a nuanced understanding of Australia's colonial history. Despite assistance from neighbours, the attack was a devastating setback for the family.
Matthew and his family later moved to Green Hills, now Windsor, and then to West Hill. By August 1806, his farm had 18 acres of grain, an orchard, pastureland, and livestock. He employed both a convict and a free labourer, reflecting his growing prosperity. In 1808, Matthew signed an address supporting George Johnston's actions against Governor William Bligh during the so-called Rum Rebellion, the first and only time in Australian history that military force was used to overthrow a government. His decision to support Johnston may have been influenced by fear of reprisals, as the rebellion was a highly contentious and dangerous period in the colony's history. In 1810, he received a liquor license, he was appointed district constable, and engaged in various legal disputes. By 1816, he was granted 135 acres at Currahong.
On the 25th of December, 1817, a year later, he accidentally drowned in the Hawkesbury River. In 1825, his widow petitioned the colonial secretary, asserting that he had died while carrying out his constabulary duties, though her claim seemingly yielded no financial support. Everingham left behind 5 sons and 4 daughters and was laid to rest in St John's Cemetery, Wilberforce. While his career was not remarkable, he contributed a lot as a pioneering settler. Matthew's wife Elizabeth remarried. On the 20th of August, 1827, she married Patrick McGarry at Wilberforce, New South Wales. Elizabeth passed away on the 12th of December, 1841, at Sackville Reach, New South Wales. Their descendants would become part of the broader Australian population, integrating into society, and contributing to its development. His life serves as an example of how former convicts were able to build new lives in Australia, demonstrating resilience and adaptability in an unfamiliar land. Matthew Everingham's journey from convicted thief to successful settler highlights the transformative nature of transportation to Australia. While initially seen as punishment, for many convicts, it provided an opportunity to start anew and contribute to the foundation of a new society. Everingham's story is a testament to the spirit of perseverance and enterprise that characterized many of the early settlers. Today, his legacy endures through his descendants and the historical records that document his experiences. His life exemplifies the broader narrative of the First Fleet convicts, who, despite their pasts, helped shape the future of Australia. As historians continue to study these early settlers, Matthew Everingham remains a significant figure in understanding the origins of modern Australian society. Please come back and join us again when we post another story from the pages of the Convict Diaries.